This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look back at the biggest stories of 2013 tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight to look back at the biggest stories of the year. Andrew Douglas, Action News 5, thank you for being here.
Yep.
Also Jackson Baker from the Memphis Flyer, thank you for being here. Bill Dries, Memphis Daily News, thanks for being here. And Les Smith from Fox 13 News. So we've got a bunch of stories. We'll kind of move through them all and discuss. I'm going to start, because I'm so used to turning to my left here, I'm going to start with Bill, your biggest, or one of the biggest stories from 2013.
Well, I think it was pretty much our biggest story from 2012 as well, and that is the reformation of public education in Memphis. In August, we started the very first year of the consolidated school system. Memphis City Schools and Shelby County Schools merged together. And as it turns out, that will likely be the last year of that particular merger, because this year suburban voters again voted to form 6 separate school systems that they plan to start for the next school year, this coming August of 2014.
And one of the things, and I don't know who wants to comment on this, that's interesting to me, I mean, some people who only sort of follow this story will say, well, we're just back to where we were, back to a city school system and a suburban school system. But it's not quite true. We're actually back to a bunch of little school systems in the suburbs with their own sort of funding levels and their own needs and priorities. There's a big difference between Millington and Germantown. I mean, your thoughts on that, Jackson? It's a much more nuanced change than some people give it credit.
Well, in a simplistic sense, yeah, a lot of people think, well, gosh, the old city system is now the county system. The old county system is a bunch of city systems, and that's a nice irony, but it isn't quite the case. The old MCS is still around, but it's in a different form because it contains the unincorporated areas of Shelby County. It's a little larger that way, but a little smaller because the state has several of those schools in the Achievement School District.
Yeah.
That's another change. State's involved. It's not just these 2 entities the state's in.
Yeah. And charter schools, I mean, changing the face of the city school system, and so on. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
It's amazing now. The stability would seem to lie with the old legacy MCS. Yeah. They know where they're going. It's the munis now where all the uncertainty lies as to how they're going to pull this off.
And they're going to have a hard time paying for what they're going to discover.
The suburbs are.
Yeah.
I think those. I mean, and so far, they will point out that, look, we've passed tax increases to pay for this, and the residents are on board, but it gets real expensive.
Well, you can already see that there's going to be a difference because the way Germantown handled their negotiations, and then you see Collierville already in negotiations with Adkin as a superintendent. Different superintendents, different school boards. There's going to be different decisions on the municipality front. It'll be interesting to see what happens 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Right.
And Dorsey Hobson, the Shelby County School Superintendent, he became the superintendent this year. Not at all what people foresaw at the beginning of this particular scenario. He said that if people are looking for the walls to go up among these 7 school systems, that's not what's going to happen at all. In fact, he says that it's the beginning of cooperation among all these districts because, as he put it, forming a school district from the ground up is going to prove to be much harder than it was to put 2 of them together.
And I would say, for everything else you mentioned, Dorsey, I think the selection of Dorsey is huge. That he has been this kind of unifying force. I mean, the board was on board with him. There have been problems. There were problems with the launch. I mean, everyone can focus on the problems with the schools, but I haven't heard a whole lot of criticism of Dorsey. He's such a change from Kreiner Cash, who was this controversial figure. People, I mean, he was an unexpected choice, but he seems to be this very much a unifying choice.
Well, it proves that maybe after all these educators who came before, you don't need an educator at the top. Maybe you need a lawyer.
That was one of the knocks, too. One, that he wasn't an educator, and 2, that he was Dr. Cash's attorney. So here he comes in, and I think, for the most part, he's exceeded expectations.
And also, give credit, of course, to Judge Samuel Hardy Mays.
Oh, yeah.
And what he did. He was the Merlin that brought all of this together just simply by being himself, but having that humorous style about it, but most importantly, letting the process work.
And insisting when you folks agree that we have a deal. And that's basically what has happened.
Yeah,
now, by the way, a lot of people want to keep score who actually won because there was a showdown here.
No one keeps score, Jackson. No one keeps score.
But here's what happened. For a long time, the County Commission and the Shelby County Schools Board said, we don't want to give away these schools. They virtually did at 10 cents on the dollar. And they did that because they saw Nashville coming back with something that would make them free anyhow. So let's get something while we can.
Right. That was a big development, that there was not another lawsuit, that actually that just kind of happened. There's some payment, there's some coverage. There's kind of a practical solution, whatever you think of it. It was a negotiated solution between adults versus in the courts.
There was strength on both sides. Strength on both sides. And so the suburbs won that showdown in a sense, except for Germantown. That was a Pyrrhic victory for them. They've lost their 3 flagships.
A lot remains to play out there. Andrew, biggest or a big story from this year past?
Well, I'm a huge sports fan. So the Memphis Grizzlies making it to the Western Conference Finals, first time ever. When you consider where the franchise was just a few short years ago, what Chris Wallace, the general manager, was able to do to build this team, bringing in Zach Randolph, you get a trade for Marc Gasol, and you saw the elements of a team that really is reflective of the city, a blue-collar town, a blue-collar type of style of basketball, strong defense. It was really amazing to watch that run and to be in the Final Four of the NBA playoffs from just a few short years ago where we were the laughingstock. It was very amazing and fun to get behind, too.
Yeah, and those are heady days, and I'm an avowed Grizzlies fan, so full disclosure.
Yeah.
Heady days that we've sort of forgotten about in the doldrums of how many people, 4 people out, and a really rough start. Right. As we tape this, we're about 500. And also the Tigers, though. The Tigers have started this year off with a whole, talking about sports. Basketball is such a big part of Memphis. Tigers, Josh Pastner gets a couple of really big wins early in the season.
Big win.
It's a pretty amazing thing. Tigers football, not so much.
Yeah, it ended on a sour note, and especially after last year when they had 3 victories. This year it petered out there, but as you said, this is a hoop city, and everyone loves their basketball. And to see the Memphis Tigers lose to Oklahoma State and then come back a couple weeks later and beat them, that was very
big.
That's
pretty much the fabric of the city.
This is going to be a key season for Josh Pastner.
Yeah.
There's always been for the last couple of years. Yes, we've gotten the 30-win seasons. Yes, he's the winningest coach in the first 4 years or whatever. But there are some people out there who still wonder about his X's and O's capabilities. And going against Louisville twice in the season, Cincinnati twice in the season, Connecticut twice in the season, 10 losses. We might be happy with just 10 losses if we get to the tournament.
Yeah. And we talk about University of Memphis, and I'll throw in another. It's not one of the biggest stories, but it's a big change, and it bodes more change next year, which is Brad Martin. I don't know if you want to say you've followed him this year. He's the interim head, the interim president, replacing longtime president of University of Memphis Shirley Raines, and he's already making a bunch of changes, Bill.
He really has an aggressive plan as an interim leader. There are some folks who actually would like him to apply for the job on a permanent basis, but he set a fairly aggressive pace. He became president in July. He immediately set a $40 million goal for a capital campaign, most of that aimed at the Park Avenue campus, and he just in the last month got a sizable donation.
One of the biggest first or second in history, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. From Bill Laurie, who was an alumni of the 1973 team that went to the NCAA finals. He also wants to increase enrollment at a school where enrollment is declining, and he said he wants to keep tuition at a steady level after a tuition hike for every year for the last 22 years at that institution.
I can make too much of this, but there's a way in which he's a little like Dorsey Hobson in that he's not the expected person. Dorsey carried that interim label, and the board basically said, we're not searching, so you might as well take it because we're stopping the surge. And not an educator. He's already laid people off, and he's gotten rid of, the funny headline where he got rid of out-of-state tuition because no one was paying out-of-state tuition. Changes like that are pretty dramatic. And you think of the University of Memphis, it's pretty a big part of this city. So
I'll give you somebody to make a try at. Robert Pirro. He has transformed the Grizzlies. Now, you look at the Grizzlies out there, not last year's Grizzlies.
Yeah.
The little bit of that grit has been polished up, maybe too much, so it looks more like a corporately arranged team, put together by Billy Bean counters, you know, and they aren't doing as well. I kind of miss Lionel Hollings, to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear that. You hear that a lot about Lionel Hollins not being on the
Let's
sideline.
go on stick with you, Jackson. Biggest or one of the biggest stories you saw this last year?
One of the biggest stories is the final breakdown of what we thought was peace and harmony forevermore between Mayor A.C. Horton and the City Council. Here lately, we've seen it all come apart. You don't go to a council meeting anymore where there is a major policy decision to be considered without several councilmen complaining about the mayor's refusing to tell them what this is about, Robert Lipscomb's refusing to tell them what it's about, refusing to give them details, questioning the viability, questioning the motivation. You didn't used to see that sort of thing. The honeymoon in that sense is over, and I'm not sure if it'll ever be restored because, frankly, A.C. Horton has been the kind of mayor who knows what he's best at. He's a reassuring presence. He represents the city. He's a flagship. Governing the city, that's something else. He hasn't quite done that yet, and that's what's...
And some of this backdrop, I mean, you guys all covered this more closely than I do, but some of that breakdown started when the state stepped in the spring, don't you think? I mean, that was kind of, I mean, that suddenly the state is saying, hey, we're
what are you
basically,
doing here?
the subtext is we're threatening to take over the city, the city finances because of the pensions are out of control, the accounts of where the money is going are out of control.
I'm going to differ a little bit. I think this has been rough under the surface, just under the surface for quite a while. I don't think they got here overnight in this relationship. I think that the ballpark, you know, there's nothing more politically volatile for a political body in this city to consider than something that involves a sporting venue for some reason. I mean, they're the most controversial things you can touch. So he walks in with a plan and says, hey, I need to vote on this today. And they revolted. But I think that revolt was a pretty long time in coming.
It's how it went. It's how it went because remember 2 weeks. Okay, there's going to be a deal made. We're here and the deal's been signed. Whatever. He comes out. Mayor Warden specifically says no deal's been done. I want to make sure that this deal is for everyone in this city, not just downtown people. Everything. Then the night of the vote. He's going, well, we have to do it. We don't have any other choice.
Right, back against the wall.
What
and the questions aren't answered. The other thing too, we had recently one of the folks from the Crosstown, the Sears redevelopment. You know, they were on the agenda that same day, looking for $15 million. And then the ballpark thing, I don't want to say it's not a lot of money. It is, but it's what $25 million. In the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot of money compared to FedEx Forum, Bass Pro, Overton Square for a world-class ballpark.
Right.
The problem was Crosstown spent a year working with the council, working with the city, answering questions. Lee Harris, who was on from City Council, said, you know, I was so overinformed about Crosstown by the time we took a vote. I said, I don't have any questions because I know the whole thing. There's not a big difference between $15 million for Crosstown and 25 or so, 20 or 25 for AutoZone. It's that thing you guys were talking about of why was it rushed? The breakdown in trust. I mean, that's a really interesting and not a good thing going forward.
Well, I think you brought it up, Eric, is that the state came in a few months ago and said, hey, listen, the finances don't look good right now. You guys have to do something. And, you know, this breakdown of trust between the administration and the council, you know, what does that mean for Memphians in the future? And that's something that we've been trying to cover is, you know, how is this going to affect this year, the end of this year, the start of next year, projects, AutoZone Park, Convention Center, perhaps. Who knows?
Right. Well, how do you get a convention center done when there's no trust on that the finances are in order and there's no trust between the mayor and the city council?
It's the visionary thing, okay? That vision thing. Who was it? Bush? Where is AC's vision? And who actually has the vision? Is it Robert Lipscomb of Special Projects?
You're a good guesser.
You know, maybe that's where the vision lies instead of where most people think it should lie with the mayor.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to give you one more anecdote.
Sure.
The perfect illustration of this. Back in August, just before the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, an occasion to honor Martin Luther King, the mayor has a signing ceremony in City Hall. Calls the press. He has representatives of ASME, the workers' union. He has grizzled veterans of the sanitation strike there, and he has, well, let's say Magna Carta on the table. Everybody signs it. And now the council will take care of this, a whole pension arrangement. The council didn't know anything about it. He had never vetted it with the council. They just dealt with that issue last week, and it was a Rube Goldberg thing, a lot of different parts. There's going to be a fee raise, which will buy new equipment, which will allow for savings, and out of those savings you can pay the pension. The council refused to support the fees. And the rest of it, they did vote in, strangely. All that's going to break down. There won't be any money for the pension.
Bill, more thoughts on this?
Going back to the ballpark money is bond money, which figures into what Andrew was saying about the controller's report earlier this year, because he remains concerned about the city's debt, not just the general obligation bond debt, which is paid for through a broader source through the property tax, but also the revenue bonds that are financed with non-property tax reform. I mean, clearly Moody's also said that you really can't separate the two, as the administration has been doing, and say, hey, it's not property tax revenue, so it's okay, go ahead and approve this debt.
Right. And we're going in there's this pension fix that is being talked about. We're talking about, I keep forgetting the number because it's too big.
60 to 80 million dollars has been the estimate that we've heard.
And then so that's around the corner as we tape this. AutoZone is still unsettled. People beginning to whisper about a convention center. You've got the fairgrounds and what kind of expansion could happen there. You've got Beale Street. There was talk recently about expanding that. And you've got Foot Homes, the last of the big housing projects. Thank you very much. That a lot of people want to see rebuilt. It's hard to imagine how these things happen if they don't get together. On the other hand, and we've had A.C. Wharton on the show, he'll go through a litany of projects that it may have been contentious that they have gotten done. Sears Crosstown, has been sat idle for decades. Overton Square, a huge transformation there.
He also,
Bass Pro, by this time next year, I think Bass Pro may well have a fish on it and be open or about to open for business.
I might want to bet on that one.
We'll wait.
There's a whole bunch of projects that have sort of moved forward in this rocky, difficult way. And I think the administration points to that and say, look, it may have been rocky, but we've had some successes.
He also insists that to just deal with the debt problem, to just deal with getting the finances right, it amounts to austerity measures, and he says that's not the way that the city helps the local economy grow.
I think to quote him, when I suggested that he said that's asinine, which was an interesting moment. I'd never seen A.C. Wharton quite so fired up as when I suggested the critics say you're spending too much money. He said, look, we've got to invest in the city. That's what it's going to take.
In June,
last thought on this.
In June, we had an interview with him. And I asked him point blank, I said, what is the problem with the communication of you, this administration, and the council? He said, it's me. I have to change the way I communicate. He's still working on that, and he needs to do that.
Okay, let's stick with you. Biggest story of this past year?
To me, the defeat for the second time in 2 years of the sales tax.
For pre-K?
For pre-K.
Yeah.
There are many ways that you could look at this. This was a leap of faith. This was a situation where if they had voted for it, we may not have seen the results of this for 15 or 20 years down the line. But that's what it called for. Pre-K for 4-year-olds, whatever, half that money, or more than half of that money, we were told, was going to go to pre-K, and then the rest was going to be divvied up in some kind of property tax umbrella, which was never really fully explained at all. But its defeat, I think, was because of the distrust. We talk about the distrust between the Wharton administration and the council, but there is a major lapse of communication between the public and what they think their government does.
Yeah, the fact that, we had Kenneth Whalum on, one of the lead opponents of it. The fact that he was on the show and all over the city talking about how I'm in favor of pre-K, but I don't trust this deal. I don't think this is the right deal. Spoke a lot about that level of distrust that you're talking about between the public and
you talk to the voters.
The people are going to implement
You talk to the voters who came out of the polls that
Well, there was at the heart of it what the grassroots saw, as a scam whereby the property tax, which only property owners pay, is being shifted over to the sales tax, which everybody pays.
Yeah.
Because that was a component of the deal.
Yeah, Andrew, your
And
thoughts?
not only distrust, I also think there was a lot of vagueness there. How many kids are we talking about? Where? How much property tax? How's that going to work? There were a lot of unexplained components there.
Yeah.
And as a result, going back to the distrust, people just said, wait a second, I don't understand everything. We're all for the pre-K program. How many kids? Wait, and I thought the city wasn't going to be in the business of educating anymore.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this? And so there were a lot of people, and I understood. I heard both sides, but I understood why there was that distrust because there was a lot of vagueness to it.
The appointment of the 8 people so early, too.
Yeah.
The 8 people of this commission that was going to have the
Oversee.
responsibility
And no
to oversee.
grassroots people on
No
that-
grassroots
on that
people.
commission.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the commission really didn't even get the attention of voters, no matter who was on it. I think voters were disengaged even before that happened. What you had here was a 7% voter turnout
Yeah.
in what was supposed to be an off election year for most of us, but in which we had 11 elections in 3 months.
Yeah. Elections,
Yeah.
I mean, we just lost track of. I mean, it's I constantly say
Yeah.
this on the show. There are too many elections. Can't we consolidate? Because people do turn out. They lose track. I follow this stuff pretty closely here and at the paper. And I lose track of who's up for what position because it's just too many elections to keep track of.
Voters that walked out that night that we polled and talked to, and there was one general theme is, if they want to get the money, they always talk in terms of they. If they want to get the money, meaning the government, they'll find it.
Yeah.
And if they want the money for this, they'll find it somewhere. And
Yeah.
Said in the same year that both the Shelby County property tax rate was increased as well as the city of Memphis property tax rate was increased.
Just 5 minutes or so left. Let's kind of, I mean, I don't know, we don't have to do predictions, but just looking ahead, biggest stories of next year. And we talked a little before the show, Jackson, looking ahead at the legislature, the big supermajority, Republicans dominating both the Senate, the House, the governorship. But, does that sort of unity continue going forward?
Well, the unity between Republicans and the legislature is already broken down. There were a couple of important bills that we expected to come down the pike at the end of the 2013 session. There was going to be a charter authorizer bill giving the state more power than it has right now, determining what charter schools get approved. That broke down because there was a power struggle between the speakers of the two houses, the two Republican speakers of the two houses.
Yeah.
Each had a bill that the other blocked, and they finally said, hell with it, this is not going, my thing's not going, your thing is not going. That's going to continue because whenever you have a majority party, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, so does politics. You've got to have an element of contention, and I think you're going to find another contention on the issue of vouchers. Brian Kelsey's going to bring this huge voucher bill, voucher everybody. Huge amounts of money. Governor Haslam doesn't want that.
Yeah.
He'll take a token bill. But we'll see who wins that fight. There's
And
gonna be a fight.
I think the other big one is going to be the Medicaid expansion. I think that, people I've talked to said that, Haslam would like to expand Medicaid. It's, quote, free money from the federal government. It would, it creates jobs, it helps people and so on. But you've got that very conservative legislature that Medicaid expansion is linked to Obamacare, so it's poison.
If
you
he
can't
can
touch
convince
it.
him it's a private enterprise thing like Arkansas,
Yeah,
he
right.
can do it.
Right.
So another story
Yeah,
I think that we should
please.
all be watching next year is Memphis International Airport. Of course, we talked about the Delta Airlines de-hubbing, Southwest Airlines here. What's going to happen? Because I think it's one of those moments where are we going to see more airlines, low-cost airlines coming in? We already know Frontier's coming in. Does that mean other ones are going to come in because there's opportunity there? Or does that mean more pullback, more fewer flights, I guess, for everybody?
Yeah. Anecdotally, I know. I've seen and I've heard this from other people. The Delta flight, the rates have come down as Southwest has ramped up.
Yeah.
Delta has become more competitive, and so although we don't have the service we had a few years ago, where we had direct service to 200 and something cities, we do have this kind of. It's a little more affordable. It seems to me anecdotally.
Kevin Kane at a press conference yesterday said something I had not thought about. He said, the same number of people coming into Memphis as before, same number of people going out.
Yeah, the media's done a bad job of that. When you talk about cutting back the flight, and I'm part of the media, you talk about cutting back the flights, so many of those flights were pass-through flights. The actual number of originations, Memphians flying out of Memphis, is actually, I think, up recently, just a ticking
It's now
upward.
the majority of traffic in Memphis
and
International.
that's the way, we were very spoiled with that hub for a lot of years. Other looking ahead, Thoughts, Bill?
Just in terms of the schools, I think that this is going to remain a very interesting year. I think that there will certainly be some challenges in the start of the suburban school systems, just as there was the first year of the consolidation as well. And I think the parents are going to be, I think this is the first year that the parents on a wide scale are going to be available, are going to realize that this means so many more choices and a move toward open enrollment on a broader scale across the county, including the city as well.
Yeah. Let's look at next
Election
year.
year coming up, 2014, the face of the Shelby County Commission will change. Mike Ritz will be lost, he'll be gone. Mulroy, some of the minds on there who have the experience, the term limited out, basically.
Yeah.
So they will be gone. Replacing 7 of those people is going to change very well
On the county
tenor
commission.
on the
Se-
county
seven out of
commission.
From new districts.
From
too.
new
Yeah.
districts,
Yeah.
it could change the face and the
Yeah.
attitudes on that commission.
Are the I lose track? Are the mayor? Are either mayor up for election next year? Who's
Yes,
up?
the Shelby County mayor, most of the county-wide offices. This is what politicians call the big ballot. It includes the once every 8-year judicial races as well,
Right.
district attorney, general, juvenile court judge. This will probably be the longest ballot in Shelby County history.
Yeah, and my next year. So I mentioned Bass Pro. I think it's going to open. You guys don't think it's going to open? Do we want to go on the record?
I think we should bet
We
on
gotta
it.
just take 30 seconds. Look, I say it opens. I say it goes forward next year.
I have a feeling there might be another delay.
Another
I
delay.
go with Andrew.
Another
Yeah.
delay.
Delay.
The smart money says delay. It's hard for me to.
I'm gonna say it's gonna open.
It's going to open. All right. Bill and I are going to say it's open. Thank you all for being here. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us. See you in 2014. Thanks and good night.